Rasputin's Princess. This is the lawsuit that forced every movie ever since to tell you the story is fake. Back in 1932, MGM released Rasputin and the Empress, a film about the fall of the Russian royal family and the murder of Grigory Rasputin. One of its characters, Princess Natasha, was widely understood to represent a real woman, Princess Irina Yusupov, the niece of Tsar Nicholas II. Her real husband was actually one of the men who killed Rasputin. The problem was a scene in which Princess Natasha is seduced and assaulted by Rasputin, something that never happened to Irina in real life. She sued MGM for libel in the English High Court, and in 1934, a jury awarded her £25,000 in damages. MGM's appeal failed. And here's the part you already know without realizing it. As a direct result of this case, studios started adding the line that all persons are fictitious and any resemblance to real people is purely coincidental. That disclaimer you've seen 1,000 times exists because of one princess. 110 million. The manager who discovered NWA watched himself become the villain of their own biopic, and he wanted $110 million for it. The film was straight outta Compton, released in 2015 and directed by F. Gary Gray, and the manager was Jerry Heller, played on screen by Paul Giamatti. In October of 2015, Heller filed suit in the Central District of California, alleging defamation, libel, false light, and copyright infringement. He claimed the movie painted him as a sleazy manager who exploited the group and cheated its members out of money. In June of 2016, Judge Michael Fitzgerald threw out most of the claims, but he let one defamation claim survive, centered on a scene where Heller talks a young artist out of hiring a lawyer. That was the rare moment where one of these lawsuits actually had a foothold. Then the story turned. Heller died in September of 2016 of a heart attack while he was driving, right in the middle of the litigation. His estate kept the case going, but a California judge dismissed what was left of the lawsuit in 2018. It's the saddest version of this whole pattern. The man who helped build the group sued over how that group's movie remembered him, got one claim past a judge, and didn't live to see it end. His estate lost anyway. These cases can outlast the people who file them. The Toupee Guy. Somewhere in The Wolf of Wall Street is a balding character in a bad toupee, and a real Wall Street executive said that man was unmistakably him. The film came out in 2013, directed by Martin Scorsese, and the executive was Andrew Green, a former board member at the brokerage Stratton Oakmont. Green sued for defamation, claiming the toupee-wearing character Nicky Koskoff, nicknamed Rugrat, was an obvious and damaging version of him. Here's the wrinkle. Green's real nickname at the firm had actually been Wigwam, which made the whole toupee thing feel a little too on the nose. He alleged the character was shown as a criminal, a drug user, and someone with no morals at all, and he wanted $25 million, filing in the Eastern District of New York in 2014. The court granted summary judgment for the studio, which means there was no jury trial and no money awarded. The judge found no actual malice and pointed out the character was a fictionalized composite of 3 different people from the book, not a portrait of one man, and the Second Circuit affirmed that dismissal. So the whole thing turned on a wig. A real executive recognized himself in a bald man in a toupee and spent years arguing it in federal court, only to lose on the defense that kills most of these suits. The character was a blend, and no reasonable viewer would map it onto one person. The Real Ramona. The woman Jennifer Lopez played in Hustlers said the movie made her a defamed criminal and she wanted $40 million. Hustlers came out in 2019, directed by Lorene Scafaria, and the real-life basis for the Jennifer Lopez character, Ramona, was a woman named Samantha Barbash. Barbash sued STX Entertainment and Jennifer Lopez's company, New Yorican Productions, alleging defamation and invasion of privacy. Her argument was that the filmmakers signaled to the public that the character was specifically her, not some made-up composite, and then portrayed her in a damaging way. She sought $40 million, filing in 2020 in the Southern District of New York. The case was dismissed later that year, with the court holding the film was a work of fiction, and Barbash recovered nothing. Now, here's the careful part. Barbash didn't dispute that she ran the real scheme. She'd already pleaded guilty to charges from the actual case years earlier. What she disputed was how the movie made her look while running it. That distinction, the real crime versus the dramatized portrayal, is exactly where all of these cases live, and it's why the court called the film fiction and walked away. By the way, if you're enjoying this so far, I post videos like this all the time, and a quick subscribe would genuinely help the channel out. Thanks. The Bomb Tech. A real Army bomb disposal sergeant watched The Hurt Locker and became convinced the main character was stolen straight from his own life. The film came out in 2008, directed by Catherine Bigelow, and the sergeant was Master Sergeant Jeffrey Sarver, a real Army explosive ordnance disposal technician. In 2010, Sarver sued, claiming the lead character, Sergeant Will James, was based on him. He had a reason to think so. The film's writer, Mark Boal, had embedded with a unit and written a 2005 Playboy article titled "The Man in the Bomb Suit." Sarver alleged misappropriation of his likeness, false light, defamation, and emotional distress. The court struck the entire complaint under California's anti-SLAPP law, which lets a court quickly toss out lawsuits aimed at protected speech, and the Ninth Circuit affirmed the dismissal in 2016, ruling the film was protected by the First Amendment. This case put a name to the defense that kills most of these suits. A real soldier believed a character was lifted from his service, and the court's answer was that even if it was, the First Amendment wins. It's the cleanest example of why filmmakers almost always come out on top. The Prosecutor. The real prosecutor at the center of When They See Us sued Netflix over how the show painted her, and Netflix ended up writing a check. When They See Us was a Netflix miniseries released in 2019, created and directed by Ava DuVernay, and it dramatized the real Central Park 5 case, in which 5 teenagers were wrongfully convicted. Former Manhattan prosecutor Linda Fairstein was depicted as a character, played by Felicity Huffman. Fairstein sued Netflix and DuVernay for defamation in 2020, claiming the show falsely portrayed her as the racist mastermind who orchestrated those convictions. This one got further than most. A judge denied Netflix's motion for summary judgment, finding that several scenes weren't supported by the historical record. Rather than risk a trial, the case settled in June of 2024, and the terms were unusual. Netflix donated $1 million to the Innocence Project. Fairstein received no payment herself, and the show added a fictionalization disclaimer. A judge agreed scenes could be defamatory, and the studio blinked. The plaintiff didn't get a dime, but she didn't walk away with nothing either. The Perfect Storm. The families of the men who died at sea sued The Perfect Storm for the way it imagined their final hours. The film came out in 2000, directed by Wolfgang Peterson and distributed by Warner Brothers, and it dramatized the loss of the fishing boat Andrea Gale and its crew in 1991. Family members of Captain Frank Tyne, known as Billy, and crewman Dale Murphy sued over the portrayal. They objected to the film showing Tyne as a quarrelsome captain who recklessly risked his crew's lives. The families brought claims under Florida's right of publicity statute and for false light invasion of privacy. A federal court granted Warner Brothers summary judgment, and the central question went all the way up to the Florida Supreme Court. In 2005, that court ruled the statute only covers uses that directly promote a product or service, which the content of a movie does not, and the families recovered nothing. This one is heavier than the others, because the people depicted were real men who actually died. Their families weren't really chasing money, they were objecting to how the movie made their loved ones look in their last moments. The court's answer was coldly procedural. A movie isn't an advertisement. The Borat Victims. Borat didn't just prank real people. It got several of them angry enough to drag 20th Century Fox into court. The film came out in 2006, directed by Larry Charles and starring Sacha Baron Cohen, and a number of the real people who appeared on camera believed they were part of a foreign documentary. When they found out otherwise, they sued. 2 South Carolina fraternity brothers sued in Los Angeles, saying they were gotten drunk and told the footage would never air in the United States. A driving instructor named Michael Sinitska sued in New York, seeking $100,000, and a group of etiquette dinner guests in Alabama, represented by the attorney Gloria Allred, filed suit as well. All of these went the same way. The suits were dismissed because the participants had signed releases for what was described as a documentary-style film, and courts ruled the movie was protected speech. Most entries on this list are about how a movie portrayed a real person. This one is about real people who didn't even know they were in a movie, then sued the moment they found out. They lost the same way nearly everyone does, undone by a signature. A kill order. 3 real United States officials sued the movie Missing for implying they helped get an American killed. The film came out in 1982, directed by Costa Gavras and distributed by Universal, and it implied that American officials in Chile knew of, or even approved, the killing of an American journalist named Charles Horman after the 1973 coup. Former United States Ambassador Nathaniel Davis and 2 other former officials sued for libel, and they came in big, seeking $150 million. The case, Davis versus Costa Gavras, was filed in 1983, and the court dismissed it, ruling that no reasonable viewer could actually infer from the film that these specific officials had ordered a killing. The film was even briefly pulled from the American market during the litigation, then re-released after the dismissal. This is the political end of the spectrum. Real diplomats suing suing over a film that touched a real and painful coup. The $150 million demand was staggering, and it went nowhere. Brandon's girlfriend, the real woman at the center of Boys Don't Cry, sued the film, and unlike almost everyone else on this list, she actually got a settlement. The movie came out in 1999, directed by Kimberly Pierce, and it told the true story of Brandon Tina. Brandon's real girlfriend, Lana Tisdale, was portrayed on screen by Chloe Sevigny, and Tisdale sued Fox Searchlight and the producers for defamation, invasion of privacy, and unauthorized use of her likeness. She objected to being shown as present and doing nothing at the scene of the murder, along with other unflattering portrayals. She filed in federal court in Los Angeles in 1999, just before the film's release. And then, in March of 2000, the case settled out of court with undisclosed terms. This is one of the rare ones where the real person actually walked away with something. Most of these suits collapse under the weight of the First Amendment, but Tisdale's quietly settled before it ever got that far. The Chess Champion. A single false sentence in The Queen's Gambit dragged Netflix into a $5 million lawsuit from a real chess legend. The series was a Netflix miniseries released in 2020, and the trouble was one line in the finale, which claimed that a player named Nona Gaprindashvili had never faced men. The thing is, Gaprindashvili is a real Georgian chess grandmaster, the first woman ever awarded the grandmaster title, and the claim was flatly false. She had played and beaten many male grandmasters over her career. She sued Netflix for defamation in September of 2021, seeking $5 million. And this one had teeth. In early 2022, a judge rejected Netflix's motion to dismiss, a notably plaintiff-friendly ruling, and the case settled later that year with undisclosed terms. This is the modern proof that these suits can still win. One throwaway line, factually wrong, about a real and accomplished woman, got past a judge and forced Netflix to settle. It's the counterexample to nearly every dismissal on this list, and the reason is simple: the line was false. Even a legend lost. Olivia de Havilland was 100 years old when she sued FX over a show about Hollywood, and even a screen legend couldn't win. The show was Feud, Bet and Joan, an FX limited series released in 2017 and created by Ryan Murphy, and de Havilland, the star of Gone with the Wind, was portrayed in it by Catherine Zeta-Jones. She sued FX on June 30th, 2017, one day before her 101st birthday, bringing claims for right of publicity and false light. Her specific objection was a fictional scene where her character gives a gossipy interview and calls her sister, the actress Joan Fontaine, a crude name. De Havilland had spent her life building a reputation for refusing to gossip, and she said the show invented a version of her that contradicted who she actually was. At first, things looked promising for her, as the trial court let the case proceed, denying FX's anti-slap motion. But then the California Court of Appeal reversed that decision in March of 2018, ruling the docudrama was protected, transformative expression. The California Supreme Court declined to review it, and the United States Supreme Court declined to hear it in January of 2019. This is the case that effectively settled the modern law. If a 100-year-old Hollywood icon, with money, lawyers, and a deeply sympathetic story, couldn't beat a docudrama in court, then almost no one can. It's a big part of why studios today fictionalize so confidently. The one who got paid. After a long list of people who sued and lost, here is the real victim of a true crime who watched a movie turn him into a creep, sued, and actually got paid. The film was Pain and Gain, released in 2013, directed by Michael Bay and distributed by Paramount, and it dramatized the real Sun Gym Gang kidnapping and extortion case in Miami. At the center of that real case was a man named Mark Schiller, who was kidnapped, extorted, and tortured by the gang. In the movie, he became the character Victor Kershaw. Schiller sued Paramount, Michael Bay, and Mark Wahlberg for defamation and false light. He alleged the film portrayed him as an unlikable, sleazy braggart who broke the law, while it depicted his actual torturers sympathetically, as bumbling fools you were almost meant to root for. He filed in 2014 in the Southern District of New York, and the case was later moved to Miami. And then, in 2016, it settled, with Paramount paying Schiller an undisclosed sum. This is the one that inverts the whole story. After a parade of plaintiffs who lost on free speech grounds, here is a real torture victim who was made the butt of the joke in his own tragedy, took on Michael Bay and Mark Wahlberg, and actually came away with a settlement. He was wronged twice, once by the gang and once by the movie, and the second time, he won. If this was worth your time, consider subscribing so you keep up with future uploads. Thanks for watching.